to 2 Samuel chapter 6 this morning for our devotion. We're in the middle of a series called Slingshot, and I'm talking about David's life after he became the king. There's certain things that David had done from which we can learn a few lessons from David's life. First, 2 Samuel chapter 6. I'm going to read the story that happened there. 2 Samuel from verses 1, chapter 6 from verses 1. Then David again gathered all the elite groups in Israel, 30,000 in all. He led them to Bala of Judah to bring back the Ark of Covenant, of the Ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They placed the Ark of God on a new cart and brought from Abinadab's house, which was on a hill. Uzzah and Ahio, Abinadab's sons, were guiding the cart as it left the house, carrying the ark of the God. Ahio walked in front of the ark. David and all the people of Israel were celebrating before the Lord, singing songs and playing all kinds of musical instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out his hand and studied the ark of God. Then the Lord's anger aroused against Uzzah, and the Lord struck him dead because of this. So Uzzah died right there beside the ark of God. David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named the place Periz Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it is still called today. David was now afraid of the Lord, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of the Lord back into my care?" So David decided not to move the ark of the Lord into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of the Lord remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and his entire household. Then King David was told, "The Lord has blessed Obed-Edom's household and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went there and brought the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with great celebration. After the men who were carrying the ark of the Lord had gone 6 steps, David sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, wearing a priestly garment. So David and all the people of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouts of joy and blowing of ram's horns. But as the ark of the Lord entered the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked down from her window. When she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she was filled with contempt for him. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place beside the special tent David had prepared for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. When he had finished his sacrifices, David blessed the people in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies. Then he gave every Israelite man and woman in the crowd a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins. Then all the people returned to their homes. In this passage, there are 2 things that will catch your attention immediately. A man who's dead and a man who danced. A man who's dead in the presence of God and a man who danced in the presence of God. What's really interesting is that both of them are connected with the Ark of the Covenant, Ark of the Lord. Let me just take a small background to you. The Ark of the Lord, the Ark of the Covenant as it is called now, is being brought back from Abinadab's house, who is the chief priest, to Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem. Last week I told you the first thing that David did after he became the king is that he conquered a city and made it his capital, city of Jerusalem. And then after he became the king and established his capital, the first thing that he wants to do now is to bring the Ark of the Covenant into his capital city. There is a reason for that, because Ark of the Covenant is known to be the box that carries the presence of God. When Moses first made it for the tabernacle, he made a box that is 3.5 feet long and 2.5 feet wide, in which he put three objects, three artifacts that Israelites would really respect. Three things that remind them of what God has done for them. One, a gold jar of unspoiled manna that they received for 40 years while they were in wilderness. Then another, the second object was the walking stick of Aaron, which interestingly has a leaf that is that came out of this particular stick, the leaf that is alive. And the third one is the stones that carried the 10 commandments that were written by the hand of God. All three of them were kept inside this box and was closed completely and sealed it. God gave very special instructions with regards to this Ark of Covenant and told people what to do with the Ark of the Covenant and what kind of respect they need to give to the Ark of the Covenant. And it is represented for Israelites, it represented the presence of God, specifically reminding them of the provision of God. You know, the manna reminds God's provision to them. It reminds them of the power of God. The staff that Aaron had in his hand, which had the leaf that is alive, reminds the power of God. And then, of course, the commandments remind them of God's precepts. So all three of them, while they are being carried, remind them of the presence of God among them. So the Ark of the Covenant is a very important thing for Israelites. Funny thing is, it remained in somebody's house for 30 years. I don't know what happened to Israelites. They actually forgot the presence of God is in somebody's house, locked up. Now, I wonder at their negligence, you know, if we find the cross of Christ, the real cross of Christ on which he was crucified, don't you think we would be cherishing it? Or if you find a manger in which Mary put Jesus in, we would really respect it and keep it guarded and safe, you know. This is something that is really important for Jews, and still they ignored that for 30 years. What happened? 30 years before, when Saul was the king, Philistines came and attacked Israelites and took the Ark of the Covenant and took it to their own city called Gath. While it was there, they put it in a temple where they did the idol worship, their own gods. Overnight, the temple, within the temple, the idol that was really tall had fallen down, and the entire city was stricken with disease. So the Philistines became scared and said, we want to send it back. And they didn't want to do anything with this Ark of the Covenant. So they put it on a bullock cart and sent it into Israel. As the bullock cart reached the city, and as the Israelites welcomed it, they put it in the nearest place that they could find. It was Abinadab's house. And that's where it stayed for 30 years. And as it stayed there, now David, after becoming the king, realizes this. I've become the king, I've got a new capital, I need the presence of God in my city, and people need to know that. So he wants to bring the Ark of the Covenant and put it in his city, the city of Zion. He goes about, calls the entire group of people of Israelites, all tribes, all the chiefs of the families, all Levites together, and tells them, do you think it's a good thing for us to get the Ark of the Covenant and put it in our home, put it in the city of Zion? And everybody agreed. So out of them, he picked up 30,000 of them, went as a parade to Abinadab's house, and he put two people as the in charge, Uzzah and Ahio. Both of them are the sons of Abinadab. And he told them, bring the Ark of the Covenant to the city. While he was busy preparing the rest of the parade and dance and music and all that stuff, these two guys built a new bullock cart, because it came in a bullock cart before. They built a new bullock cart and put the Ark of the Covenant on the bullock cart, and they were bringing in. And as you've seen in the story, that some point after barely 2 miles into the journey, it actually, the wheel of the bullock cart had actually fell into a ditch, and the Ark of the Covenant was about to fall. Uzzah saw that, so he put his hand to stop it. Bible says, and as we have just read, God instantly killed him on the spot. It's really funny, what Uzzah was doing was right. I mean, it was falling down. It is something of a real importance to the people of Israel. And so if it falls, it would touch the ground, and maybe Uzzah thought, it falls, the presence of God, the Ark of the Covenant that is carrying the presence of God, if it falls onto the ground, it would be muddy and it should not happen to such a sacred thing. So probably with that in his mind, he put his hand to stop, but God kills him instantly. Then you see on the other side, 3 months later, David comes back again, as they kept it in a person's house called Obed-Edom's house. Now David wants to bring it back. As he's bringing back, people were celebrating. David was celebrating. David was really happy as he sees the Ark of the Covenant being brought into the house, into the city of Zion. He's dancing. He lost his all senses. He's completely lost in his worship with God. He asked for the ephod. You remember 3 weeks back I talked about ephod. He brought the ephod back and put it on him, and basically there is nothing but the ephod on him. By the way, an ephod is not more, it doesn't cover more space than a long banyan, if you have a banyan. So basically David had nothing except for a banyan on him. Now it really looks disgusting for a king to do that. Imagine Barack Obama dancing in the streets of New York with a banyan. Now I didn't want to say anything about our president, so I just chose somebody else's president. Imagine that. Now that wouldn't be, that really is not really a diplomatic thing to do, or a nice thing to do for a king to do that. Now I understand Michal's frustration. She is really disgusted at her husband, who is the king of Israel. By then, King Israel has become now the most powerful country in the world at that time. And so Michal is logically upset at her husband, who is dancing with a banyan on the streets. He shouldn't do that. A king shouldn't do that. It is not good for a king to do that. And so she was really upset. If I was there, I was at both the processions, probably I would try and find a place where I could duck. Because I saw what God has done with Uzzah. I probably would be hiding someplace knowing that the king of Judah is now dead, for sure. I mean, Uzzah just touched the Ark of the Covenant. This guy shamelessly is dancing in front of the Ark of the Covenant. I'm sure God would rain down the acidic rain and thunderstorms and kill him on the spot. So I probably would duck somewhere, hoping that in few seconds the sky would open and the sounds would come and David would be dead. And as I look at the sky, stare at it, nothing really happens. I wait and wait and wait, nothing happens. David looks like as he's enjoying himself. He enjoyed himself, he finished the procession, goes inside the house, puts on his clothes, then comes back and gives food to everybody who's come for the procession, and then goes back home. Everybody goes back home. Now really, this looks very unjust to me. Because one guy was actually trying to save the Ark of the Covenant. The other guy is actually showing the disrespect to the Ark of the Covenant. Why would God kill one guy and spare the other guy? The man who tried to save the Ark of God is dead. And the man who just enjoyed himself is blessed. I'm kind of curious. I started thinking about this story and I wondered, what was God trying to teach to us through this incident? What is happening there? what does it mean when God strikes one person dead, another person he leaves alone? Is he trying to teach me something about his presence, something about his nature? And as I dwelt in the word, I also looked at the cross references, First Chronicles chapter 13, 14, 15, 16. All four chapters explain the entire incident as it happened. So I went back and started reading the story, started wondering at what exactly God trying to do there. And then I found there are two truths that God was trying to teach you and me. Two truths you and I need to learn. Two truths that will change our lives forever now. Pay attention, because it's going to change your life now. If you're not going to listen, if you're not interested in listening today, I'll give you 1 more minute to walk out of this place, because after this, you're bound to listen to what I'm saying. The first one. The first truth that I've learned is this: that the presence of God is not a fashion parade. The presence of God does not come just because 10 people stood on the stage, picked up 4 guitars and a keyboard and a drum and started playing music. Presence of God doesn't come because I stand here and I preach what I prepared for 7 days in the week, in the past 1 week. Presence of God does not come because we have 4 JBL speakers and a great mic. Presence of God does not come because all of us are working here and we now want God to do something here for 2 hours on a Sunday morning. Now, God comes on his own terms. That's what I've learned from that lesson, from that incident. God killing Uzzah taught me this: do not take the presence of God for granted. Do not take the name of God for granted. The problem with us is that we use the name of Jesus like a slang. That our church, the things that we do in the church, of the church, for the church, we make it so complacent by the way we behave towards that. I guess by striking Uzzah, God taught 2 very important lessons to us just by striking him. Telling us that do not take my presence as a fashion parade. Just because you are doing fashion parade, I don't want to come and walk among your pews. Just because you want me to walk, I don't do that. I come on my own terms. Just because you planned well, so well the program, you don't expect me to walk around. I kind of imagine what happened there to Uzzah. Kind of gave this shock to everybody. That it had this shock value of, imagine we just celebrated our 7th anniversary, right? So that is one of the biggest celebrations that we do as a church, anniversary program, and we plan so much. We kind of do our rundown and we have everything in place, and then we are singing our songs, and then I get on stage as if I'm the hero who built this church, and then God just strikes me dead on the stage. Imagine the shock value that it will cause. That's what happened to everybody in Israel. They were so distressed, nobody wanted to do anything anymore. They just walked back, terrified. What made God so angry? I think it's because Uzzah replaced commission with complacency. That's his first problem. Uzzah replaced commission with complacency. God called each of us to do something very specifically for his glory. Let's go back again into the history. Now Leviticus chapter 16, Numbers chapter 4 talk about what to do with the Ark of the Covenant. When Moses made the Ark of the Covenant, he specifically told only Levites can do anything to do with this. And within the Levites, Aaron's children, only Kohathites, that means the family that is called Kohathite, only people from that family can carry the Ark of the Covenant. Nobody else. Now even they should not touch the Ark of the Covenant. They must carry it with acacia rods. Now what are these acacia rods? The rods that are made by the acacia tree. How do you carry the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark of the Covenant had 4 rings attached to it. So what every time they want to carry the Ark of the Covenant, the priest would put the acacia rod from one ring to the other ring, so that the other person on the other side can carry it. So they would put the acacia rods in the rings and then carry it so nobody will touch it. Just to show people how holy His presence is, God made that a rule. So as a Kohathite priest, Uzzah knows that he cannot put Ark of the Covenant on anything that you see. He knows that he needs to carry it, not put it on a bullock cart. Just because Philistines sent the Ark of the Covenant in a bullock cart doesn't mean a Levite should do that. God probably did not do anything with the Philistines because they are unbelievers. They don't know anything about the rules of God. You are a believer. You know what to do. You know the commandments from the Bible. You know how to live your life. An unbeliever does not know anything about the Word of God, so he is living. But you as a believer know how to live in this world. And yet if you do not, what happened to Uzzah would happen to you and me. You see, it stayed in Abinadab's house for 30 years. So probably Uzzah and Ahio grew up with that. They saw the Ark of the Covenant almost every single day. They saw how it gathered dust in their house. They saw how it remained in a barn that is locked. Maybe while they were playing outside of their barn, they probably peeped in from the window and saw, how does the Ark of the Covenant look like? They have become so familiar with the Ark of the Covenant, with the presence of God, that they took now it for granted and put it on a bullock cart and thought, nothing happened for 30 years, what will happen today? That's why God struck him. Do not take the presence of God for granted. Do not make holy a humdrum. See, that's what happened with Uzzah. He's taken the commission of God for complacency. He thought nothing happened before, so nothing had happened now. So God had to teach him a lesson. God had to teach everybody a lesson. Sacred has now become a second rate. Commission has now become complacence. We see no obedience in the way that they brought the Ark of the Covenant. There is no reverence as how they brought the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, he was trying to guard it from falling down, but in his heart he has no reverence for it from the beginning itself. The way he planned it was wrong. The way he's bringing it was wrong. So God had to teach a lesson. God will teach us a lesson when we start taking His holiness for granted. When we start taking the time with Him on a Sunday morning for granted. When we start taking the job that God gave in your hand for granted. God sometimes has to give you a visa to hell, just like how He gave to Uzzah. Somebody preached on that and said Uzzah got a visa. I thought that's a nice title for a message. I guess sometimes we are taking everything that we do on a Sunday morning for granted. Or forget a Sunday morning, even our Christian walk, we take it so for granted. We want God's presence to fill our bedroom. When we take time and go down and kneel down, and we are thinking, God, I can't feel anything, so you're not here. Why should He come into your bedroom? Is it because you prayed? Why should He do anything that you ask Him to do? We want God to parade in front of us as if a fashion star would walk in front of us. We want God to wear the same clothes that we want Him to wear. We want Him to say the things that we want Him to say. On a Sunday morning, we want Him to tell us what we want. Who are you to do that? Have you become so lethargic, so filled with leprosy in your heart that you forgot that God is a holy God? Do not take what He told us to do for granted. Commands must replace, commission must replace complacency. That's the message. Don't grow lax before the holy. We want to go to church whenever we want to go. We want to take communion anytime we want. We will walk into a communion service. This is a Sunday service, by the way, communion service today. We walk into a communion service without even preparing ourselves in our heart. We don't even know what to expect on a Sunday morning from God. Have we got up in the morning, any of us, I wouldn't say any of us, most of us, have we got up and knelt down and said, God, today, as I go to your presence, would you please speak to me? We probably got up, some of us, at 10 o'clock in the morning and then realized, oh, I need to be at the church at 10 o'clock. Rushed without even brushing. And you want God to speak to you? You see, here is the second thing I've learned from Uzzah. Cost must replace convenience, because Christianity has now become convenience to us. Church has now become convenience to us. That we want things as we want. If I do the service, let's say most of you have walked in at 10:30 today. I'm just going to blast you today anyway. 10:30 you walked into the church. If I move the service to 10:30, do you think you'll come at 10:30? You'll come at 11:15. Why? Because you don't care. Sorry for being rude today. Who cares? I'm just going to church. And do you want God to do everything you want? Nah, that's not going to happen. Cost must replace convenience. When I want God to do something, when I want the presence of God in my life, I must pay for it. You're not willing to pay for it. Why do you think God will pay for you? You're not even willing to give up your time to come into His presence, even once in a week, and spend time at His feet and ask Him to speak to you. Why do you think God will minister to you? That's the point. God is not a fashion parade. The presence of God is not a program. Uzzah teaches me that. The Kohathites will come and carry these things to the next destination, but they must not touch the sacred objects or they will die. That's the word that God told very specifically. Numbers chapter 4, 15, verses 15. Or chapter 7, verses 9, they should be required to carry the sacred objects of the tabernacle on their shoulders. Only then the presence of God would go with them. Wow. In other words, He's telling them, pay cost. Pay for God. He paid His Son for you. You can't pay your time to come into His presence and sit down at His feet. What's going to happen if I come 10 minutes early and sit down here and just spend some time in prayer? Nothing. It probably will prepare you to listen to God. Those 10 minutes might actually change your life because you decided that you want to give extra 10 minutes to your God. I just don't know why we are becoming so lethargic in our lives. Maybe God will walk in when His commands are revered, when our hearts are clean, and when we confess what we have done. The image of a dead Uzzah sends us a sobering and a shuddering reminder to all of us who attend our churches that God won't be loaded on a convenient wagons or touted by dumb animals. God is not aroused by like a genie who pops out of a bottle by our music. No. God's presence would walk into this place only when our hearts are clean and we are ready to receive Him. I just pray that at some point in my life, I don't want to name Capstone Perez Capstone. That would be a very sad thing to do. Like David had to put Perez Uzzah. Do you know what David called it, right? The place where God stuck him. Uzzah down. David called the place Perez Uzzah because God burst out there and killed Uzzah instantly. May we never have that name tagged to us. Maybe today is a good time to learn from Uzzah. You see, I guess that's what David learned. That's probably why his dancing didn't bother to God. There's something about his dance that kind of taught me the second truth. The first truth was God's presence is not a fashion parade. But the second truth is this, that God's presence is a beautiful gift. It's a gift. It's not a prize, it's a gift. God generously gives to us His presence. That David realized. That David understood from his heart. He knew that I must be careful with the presence of God because it's a beautiful gift given to me and I need to know how to treat it well. You see, his dancing started before he realized a lesson that God taught him from one experience. The passage that I read tells the entire story in one go, but it actually has more. Chapter 13, 14, 15 and 16 of 1 Chronicles. In those 3 months when the ark of the Lord was in Obed-Edom's house, something happened in those 3 months. Chapter 14 talks about 2 things that happened during that month. 2 times Philistines have attacked Israelites. Twice. After the king of Philistines heard that David had now become the king, he wanted to conquer the land of Israel. So he gathers his army and comes to a valley and camps there in order to fight David. So David goes to God and asks God, should I go against these guys? God says, yep. Will I be victorious in this war? God says, yes. So David takes his men and goes to the valley and fights and conquers them. So they run, the Philistines. Few days later, again, the Philistines gathered themselves back again into the valley. Again, David goes to God. Again, David kneels down in the presence of God and asks God, should I go and fight with these guys? God says, yes, go. Will you give me victory? Yes, I will, but I want you to do something. What? Go to the valley where these guys are camped, the Philistines are camped. Don't fight with them. Don't attack them. So what should I do? Stand around them in a circle. Interesting, isn't it? Go find a tree called Papasia, stand behind them as a circle. All the army, just stand there. Wait for me. So what should I wait for? God says, when you hear marching sound of the footsteps from the top of the trees, usually they get from the ground, right? From the top of the trees, then you go and attack them, you will be victorious. Now the command looks really ridiculous. First of all, David didn't have to pray because he already prayed. He already asked God, are you going to give me victory? God said yes. So if God has given me the victory in the past, He will obviously give me now. It's the same enemy, right? Same kind of attack. The modus operandi is the same. So what's the big deal about going back again and asking God? Let's say he asked God to go and pray and ask God, God says, yes, you will be victorious, yes, but you do this. Now that kind of looks really ridiculous. I mean, what's the point of standing in a circle and waiting for hearing the voice of footsteps, marching steps from the top of the trees? That doesn't sound logical. But David does that. And he becomes victorious. So I sat there and I looked at that scripture, stared at it for like 1 hour and thought, what's the point of standing there in a circle? Is there a magic in the circle, or is there a magic in the papacia trees, or is there a magic in the marching feet's voice, sound of the marching feet? It dawned on me this morning that there is no magic in that. The point is that God is trying to tell David, do exactly as I say and you will be victorious. The point is not in the circle. The point is not even in the tree. The point is not even in the voices of marching feet. The point is doing exactly as God tells you to do. Not turning to the right or to the left. Exactly as he tells you to do. Get the point? I guess that's what God taught him. So he comes back, chapter 15, calls up all the people together, calls Levites together, and then tells him, now I know why God killed Uzzah. Why? Because you guys didn't do exactly what God told you to do. So God killed Uzzah. Better consecrate yourself now. So he made the entire clan of Levites consecrate themselves. Only then they went back again to the Ark of the Covenant, to Obed-Edom's house, and carried it back into the city. Now they know the presence of God is with them. That's why David burst out in a song of praise. David couldn't stop himself because now he realizes how holy his God is, and yet how gracious his God is to all of us, to his life. You saw David's reaction, that he dances, Bible says he danced with all his might in the presence of God. Here is what I've learned from there. 2 lessons you're going to take away again. 2 lessons I taught you from the last truth. 2 lessons from this truth. That commemoration, our commemoration, must be filled with reverence. The commemoration of our God must be filled with reverence. What we do today is commemorating what Christ has done for us on the cross. God gave, just like his presence was given there, God gave his Son. Isn't that what the Bible says? For God so loved the world that he gave. He gave his only begotten Son. God gave his Son, who is God himself. So the one who is living inside your heart is your God. That means you have the presence of God in you. God gave that presence graciously. So when you walk here, be careful how you partake in the communion. Not just this, when you walk into the presence of God, and as the worship is being led, as you remember what God has done, don't do it for the sake of doing it. Don't sing the words because you look at the words and you thought, those are nice words. The music is more better. Commemorate what God has done with reverence, with fear and trembling. That's what David teaches us in chapter 16. At the end of the procession, David burst into a song of thanksgiving. That's what the Bible shows. There is a big psalm that you will see there, almost 30 verses of a song that came out of the heart of David in chapter 16 of 1 Chronicles. The entire psalm, as you go through, 3 times David says, remember. What is he asking us to remember? Remember who your God is. Let God fill your heart, and let your heart be filled with reverence to your God. David's heart was filled with that. The second lesson that David taught me is this, that my worship must be offered with sacrifice. My worship must be offered with sacrifice. In a moment, David decided that nothing really matters to him except for his God. Now, at the outset, David probably would not lose the kingdom. But David is definitely in the danger of losing the respect of the people around him. David definitely lost the respect in the eyes of his wife, Michal. And yet David didn't care. I don't care what you think. You are not the one who made me the king. That's what he told her. In fact, you will never become my wife unless God gave you to be my wife. So big deal, bhai, I'll lose it. In other words, he's saying, I don't care to lose anything when it comes between me and my God. Didn't matter whether his job would be there or not. Didn't matter whether his wife would be there or not. Didn't matter whether his family would be there or not. I'm not giving you permission to leave your wives today, by the way. That's not the point there. The point is, David teaches me the priority is God. That when my worship is offered with a heart of sacrifice, that becomes pleasing to God. That's why his dance, God didn't mind. That's why the West, only the West, God didn't mind. Now, I'll give you another reason why God didn't mind. If you have a 3-year-old girl or a 2-year-old boy, you work hard for the whole day, then you're coming back home. As you come back home after a long day's work, on the way you bought 2 chocolates, Cadbury chocolates, and you're coming home, you want to give it to your children. Just as you are coming into your apartment or your home and you're about to park, your children hear the voice of your car, the sound of your car, realize that dad has come and they come rushing out. However they look like, they're rushing outside and are now coming to, as you're getting down from the car and walking towards your door, they're coming and rushing and catching your feet. You are not going to look around and think, what is the neighbor thinking with my children's behavior with me right now? Are you going to do that? You are not even worried if your 2-year-old came to you with a diaper on. That's all. Nothing else. You don't care if your daughter's nose is leaking. Who cares? They just came to express their love to you. I wonder that's probably was God's reaction when he saw David. Hey, this guy just loves me. He just wants to come to me. I guess that's why God didn't strike him dead. He saw David as a father sees a child. That's the point. Uzzah missed that. David got it. That while I don't take God's presence for granted, I know how to enjoy the presence of God. So when you come on a Sunday morning, don't be rigid and think God who struck Uzzah, I'll also sit quietly. I better not touch anything, Baba. Kuch to bhi ho jata. That's what David teaches me. While I have reverence in my heart, I also enjoy the presence of God because I'm safe in the presence of God. Safe. Do you know why you are safe? Ephesians chapter 1, 4-6. Write it down. Go back and read it. This is what Paul says. The Father, even before the foundations of the earth were laid down, saw us through Jesus Christ and saw us as holy people. One more time. And I'm just paraphrasing what Paul wrote there. Father, even before the foundations of the earth were laid, saw you and me through the blood of Jesus Christ and saw us as holy people. That's the key. Listen to this very carefully. If you ever questioned God's logic in creating you, this is the answer. If you ever questioned God's logic or God's sensibility in creating Adam and Eve, this is the question. If you ever asked God, God, you know Adam and Eve are going to sin against you. Why do you create them? Chumma, they brought problems to us. Or sometimes we even pray and say, God, you know that I will fall again and again. Why did you bring me into this world? It's because of that verse. God, even before the foundations of the earth were laid down, saw you through the eyes of Jesus Christ as a holy person and said, I love this guy so much, I want this guy. So, the point is this, that when God wanted to create the world, He knew instantly that Adam and Eve are going to sin. He saw you in this world at that time. And He saw that you're not going to listen to Him. He also saw that you're going to break the law of God again and again and again and again. He saw that you will walk away from Him. He saw that you will rebel against Him. Father saw all that. Now, Father being a holy God cannot allow sin to be in your life and allow you to come to Him. That's not going to happen. He's a holy God. There is no sin in Him. So our sin cannot come to Him. Remember why Father turned away His eyes from Jesus? Because all of our sins are on Him. So Father had to turn away His eyes from Jesus. So God saw you and loved you and know that you are going to sin against Him and know that you are not going to listen to Him. And yet He loved you so much, He wants you to be with Him. So He made a path through Jesus Christ. Even before the foundations of the earth were laid down, Christ came and died on the cross. The plan of Christ coming into this world was already laid down. So Father now saw Jesus coming into this world and dying on the cross, taking all your sin on Himself. That makes you what? A holy person. In the sight of God, you're a holy person. You don't have sin anymore. So, you were created. Adam and Eve were created. But of course, you will be cleaned only if you believe in Jesus Christ. Of course, your heart would be set free only if you come to the cross and say, God, I know I'm a sinner. I want you to come into my heart, my life, my family. I want you to be the king of my life. Once you do that, He cleanses you completely. And you are saved. You're a holy person in the sight of God. Beautiful, isn't it? That the grace of God is a gift. That the presence of God is a gift to you and me. So we better enjoy the presence of God while we revere the holiness of God. Both are important. Both are taught in this incident. Do not take your time with God in this church for granted. The day all of us start doing that, including me, please know that there will be a Perez that would be added to Capstone. And that's the end of Capstone. That would be a sad day. And I don't want that. Let's be people who respect God, respect His presence, and still enjoy in His presence. Before we partake in the communion today, I'd like you to close your eyes. And remember, look into your own hearts today. Maybe you just need to cross-check yourself. Is your heart complacent these days? Is your heart irreverent these days? Maybe it's time for us to confess it in the presence of God. Maybe it's time for us to turn our eyes back to Him. Before we partake in the communion, look to Him and tell Him, God, we are sorry for the irreverence we are showing towards You. We shouldn't have, but we are doing that. So ask Him to forgive you. Ask Him to change your life. Make your heart a child's heart. Let His grace sink into you. Pray this prayer of confession and then worship Him with your heart, full of admiration for who He is, your God. The elements will be served to you as you pray. We will all together partake in the bread and the cup together as a family. But as the elements come to you and as you hold, as the worship team reminds us of what Christ has done with their song, you take time to talk to your God. You take time to recommit yourself. You take time to ask Jesus to come into your heart. If this is your first time, if you have never had Jesus in your life, and you want a God who planned for your future even before the foundations of the earth were laid down in your heart, maybe today is a good day to ask Him to come into your heart. Maybe you are taking the presence of God for granted these days. Maybe it's time for you to say, God, I'm sorry. Help me. Help me to regard your presence with reverence. Maybe today is a good time to choose to worship Him with sacrifice. Just take a moment as the worship team sings the song. Take this time to talk to your God.